Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, people. This is Nature of Reality Radio on March 4th, 2015. This is your host, Andrew Fisher, broadcasting every Wednesday from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to expose the true and false nature of reality for what it is and what it isn't. Today we're going to have a very interesting guest on the show, Patricia Cori. I have listened to some of her interviews on Alfred Weber's YouTube channel, and apparently Chris Hales is a big believer in her work. I recently heard her name brought up in an interview that Chris Hales did on one of the In5D radio programs in regards to Patricia's work on the Anunnaki and Nibiru and such. That'll definitely come up in conversation in this show. I've taken some notes on Nibiru before and the Anunnaki from Andrew Bartz's interview with Lance White on the Creating 5D YouTube channel, which anybody can watch in part 2 of the series. He goes over this and took notes on that for my show with Janet and Sasha Lesson, who knew Sitchin personally and worked with him. I'll definitely be using some of my notes. I have them here on my side here in this show. But we're actually going to talk about Patricia's work involving dolphins and whales, because she's been doing a lot of work to try to keep them from becoming extinct. There is some extraterrestrial connection behind dolphins and whales, no question about that. And there's a lot more to them than meets the eye. We'll talk about that first. Other stuff involving Earth's hidden history, spirituality, and a little bit of mysticism, philosophy, ancient civilizations, metaphysical healing, and unexplained mysteries. Clairvoyant stuff too, because Patricia has some work with all that stuff, as you see here in my video description. For more than 15 years, she has guided fellow spirit travelers through sacred sites around the world, and she has her own radio program, Beyond the Matrix, which can be heard worldwide Saturdays, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on BBSRadio.com. We'll get to her at no later than 10 after the hour, which is in about 8 minutes. First, though, as usual, we will start with the news, courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. First article, Lord Rothschild, arguably the most powerful Illuminati bloodline, no question. It's not arguably, it is the most powerful Illuminati bloodline. Lord Rothschild warns investors of, quote, most dangerous geopolitical situation since World War II. The head of £2.3 billion trust says, that's pounds, the British currency, the head of £2.3 billion trust says wealth preservation is the key. Well, since Patricia Cori's on, she's done some work with the Anunnaki that, kind of reminds me of gold. I don't know if Lord Rothschild is warning people of a gold-backed currency coming, and of course the Rothschilds being a banking family, they would not want a gold-backed currency. They would rather have a fractional reserve banking. So you could imagine that if there is some truth to the claim, as people like World Bank whistleblower Karen Hughes and Benjamin Fulford and other people have said that there's going to be gold-backed currency in the near future. I mean, don't think it's going to happen. We're all going to be saved, and then after about 10 years of gold-backed currency, we'll get to no money at all. I mean, that would be great, but folks, it's best not to become involved with something like this, because to use an analogy people have used, it's like the lottery. A lot of people hear there's a jackpot in the lottery, so a lot of people buy tickets, and they keep losing their money buying tickets, and then just one person lucks out, and then it happens all over again, and so many people get unlucky because something they thought they would win did not happen. Well, we don't want the same thing happening with this gold-backed currency thing, so don't get your hopes up and think that it will definitely happen. We're on a positive timeline, so it's kind of unavoidable, but do what you can with fractional reserve banking money for as long as we have to do it, and well, be wise with your money, folks. Maybe even buy some gold and silver, as much gold and silver as you can reasonably afford. But I don't know if that's what Lord Rothschild is talking about when he's talking about a most dangerous geopolitical situation in regard to dangerous being something the powers that be don't want. But check out this article if you want. It's the first article currently on InfoWars. Next article, video. ISIS leader was armed and funded by Obama White House. John McCain and Lindsey Graham met with Islamic State militant. Yes, we all remember that classic picture of John McCain smiling in a photograph with an ISIS leader, and ISIS also being Al-Qaeda. They changed the name to ISIS because people were catching on to the fact that the U.S. government publicly runs Al-Qaeda and uses Al-Qaeda as a empire-spreading tool. Put Al-Qaeda in a country, tell the world, that country's being invaded by Al-Qaeda, we need to go to that country to save it. The whole scam being they're the people that said we're going to save the country are the ones that put Al-Qaeda in that country, and then they go in that country to further the Illuminati empire. That's how it works. So shouldn't come as a surprise that ISIS leaders was funded by the Obama White House. No surprise at all. Next article, White House involved in illegal email scandal with Hillary Clinton. The Obama administration complicit in Clinton's use of private unsecured email in exchanges with White House. Well, Hillary Clinton, there's some serious problems with her. We talked about that in my interview with Sherry Edwards last week. She analyzes speech and voices and found that Hillary, there is definitely something in her voice, not just the cackling laugh that she sometimes does, but it sounds like such a witch that she is. But she is an Illuminati Grand Dame. She's also a shape-shifting reptilian alien. But, yeah, other than that, there's really some other serious problems with her, as told by her voice, as Sherry Edwards saw. So if Hillary does run for president, she probably wouldn't win because people would want a Republican president because they're sick of Obama at this point. But would people realize that if Jeb Bush is a candidate, as Sherry Edwards said he probably would be, because his voice is perfect for a candidacy for being a president? I mean, would people realize there's obviously a problem when you have like a Clinton and a Bush in the White House all the time? Come on, wake up, people. It's obviously that leaders are selected and not elected. All right, next article. 6-year-old child suspended for making gun shape with hand. Child forced to undergo re-education on, quote, what it means to be dead, unquote. Oh, my God, come on. You know, I do actually have a memory of when I was in grade school in which I made a gun out of paper in art class, and just for the hell of it, I pointed the gun at my teacher and said, pow, just for the teacher knew I was joking around, but she was like, that wasn't very nice. You shouldn't point guns at people even if they're not real. But I didn't get punished or suspended for that. But nowadays, it seems like if I did that, I definitely would get punished, suspended, or maybe in some cases expelled. We need guns to protect ourselves from tyrants in government. That's why the Second Amendment exists. And now the government is trying to make schools demonize guns to make us want to give up the Second Amendment. Well, we're not going to give up the Second Amendment. We're not going to give up our right to bear arms, because if we give that up, we lose everything else. And actually, Alex Collier, ED contactee, he claims it is Andromedan contacts. They told him that the American people need to value the Second Amendment, because if they lose that, they lose everything. How's that for extraterrestrial advice and wisdom? So what a shame that this happens to this kid. Our next article, CIA asset joins Islamic State in Libya. Belhadj, whatever this name is spelled, Belhadj, worked with U.S. and NATO to overthrow Gaddafi. Yes, it was all part of a plot to put Illuminati-controlled powers and Illuminati-controlled banks into those dictatorships. It's funny, every national government is controlled by the Illuminati, but some countries that are not corporations, the few that aren't corporations, might as well be, because they're dictatorships, and they were the dictatorships in the Middle East. But the powers that be are trying to change that by kicking out those leaders that they're sick of using as their puppets to make things even more under their control. Well, people are waking up to that now, so maybe it won't be so easy to use Al-Qaeda to invade. All right, next article, video, militarized cops trained to storm houses in Illinois. Use live flashbangs, carry weapons, and show of force. Yeah, Illinois, that's the state where you can easily get arrested simply for filming the police. Now they're training that to storm houses. Why Illinois? Why is that becoming a police state? Oh, yeah, don't even get me started on that house in Chicago, where not a house, a building where people are being tortured like Guantanamo. That's been all over the alternative media news, but not the mainstream news. It's a shame the only mainstream news had they reported that was The Guardian in the UK. Why can't our news report that? How sad. It is a shame. All right, next article about police. No surprise. Police overwhelmingly reject AR-15 cop killer ammo ban. Quote, it's offensive and disgusting. They are using officer safety as a guise to further infringe on the rights of the people. Well, give the police credit if they are rejecting an ammo ban. Some police understand that after they disarm the people, they want to disarm the police too. And the only police that will be allowed to own guns are New World Order controlled police that care nothing for people's rights. So cops don't go into the trap of going along with the plot to take away the Second Amendment, because you will have your guns taken away, and apparently some cops are realizing that. All right, one final article here. Russian fighter jets practice attacking NATO ships. Tensions over Ukraine continue to build despite ceasefire. Yes, ceasefire, like there is a ceasefire. Yeah, right. So, well, Putin and your cronies in the Russian government, please don't make things worse than they have to be. We know NATO is designed to be the globalist military force, but still, you don't have to attack them. So please, Putin, don't make any mistakes here attacking NATO ships. Just try to use peaceful, non-violent protest, as Gandhi would say. All right, enough of that. I'm going to get Patricia Cori on as soon as I get a quick drink here. All right, I believe this has to be her because she told me she's in on Skype. Area code 415, Patricia Cori, is that you?
It is. Hello.
How you doing? You're calling from Italy, right?
I am.
Yeah. By the way, since you're in Italy, is there truth to the claim that around the Colosseum you can see the ghosts of the gladiators and hear people crying, moaning, and whining as if they were being tortured in the Colosseum? Is there truth to that?
Absolutely. I don't know how many people that, let's say, don't have a psychic faculty are aware of that, but for sure, if you're tuned in, I can say that I had a client once who asked me to come and do some energy clearing in her apartment because she kept seeing this horrifying scene of this bloody gladiator in her apartment. She lived right near the Colosseum, and so when I went there, in fact, it was she had to move out. Nothing could be done to clear it out, and the energy around the place. I mean, this Colosseum was a heavy-duty scene, blood and gore and guts, and it makes me laugh to think that we're still doing this. The boxers and fighting for entertainment is still going on this planet. I won't even talk about war. I'm talking about the entertainment level of spectators sitting around and cheering on fighters that are fighting to the death.
Yeah, it's what they call bread and circus. I believe that phrase does have its roots in ancient Rome. Some person said, if you want to distract the public, just give them bread and circus.
And the thing is, you talk about it being barbaric, but we're still doing it. So there is this aspect to human nature that I don't get, but there you go.
Right. All right, but that's a side issue for all practical purposes. You know what? I think I might as well let you plug your radio show for starters. So before we get to your research, here's your opportunity to plug your radio show for all the listeners.
Well, I thank you for that, but I'm currently on hiatus. But my show is called Beyond the Matrix for people who think outside the box, which is clearly you and your audience. So thank you for that. I'm on hiatus for the moment because I've been very, very involved with writing a lot of new material, and hopefully the show will be back on and running in a month or two. So for people that are interested, it's BBSRadio.com. And I'm not sure if I'll be getting my same slot or not, but they can check shortly and see if and when I'm back up.
I'm glad you pointed that out because I did actually try to plug your show for you, but I didn't mention the hiatus part. So glad you made that clear. I can't imagine myself taking a hiatus from this radio show. I'm too dedicated to it. But anyway, let's get on with the research aspect. Dolphins and whales. I've always been fascinated with them when I was a kid. I've been on several whale watches when I was young. Never saw any whales. Plenty of dolphins, though. I definitely do subscribe to the idea that dolphins and whales have extraterrestrial connections to a very high extent. I mean, not all dolphins and whales are good. I mean, you think of all dolphins as having the attitude of Flipper and being really nice and really playful in general, but no, there are malevolent dolphins out there and malevolent whales. George Kavaslis did make that clear in my private session, not my private session, my radio interview with him. And, dolphins, I know dolphins, you can actually tell that they have names, that they do actually name each other, and using certain sound frequencies, it's possible to tell that dolphins actually have given themselves names, and you can tell that from their sonar and such. But in regards to the work that you do on dolphins and whales and why you value them so much, you got the floor on this subject. Go right ahead.
Okay, but before I do, I'm curious about your comment about malevolent dolphins and whales. I'm wondering where that's coming from. I mean,
I just said George Kavaslis told me that in my radio interview with him. He made it clear that in this duality matrix, you're not going to find 100% benevolent dolphins and whales.
Well, I don't know about that. These are animals in the wild. Animals in the wild hunt. They kill to live, etc. So if that would be considered malevolent, then I'd have to agree with him. But really, malevolence is such a human aspect, a human quality and intent. I have difficulty attributing that to a dolphin or a whale. But that said, okay, let's talk about the nature of these incredible animals. For starters, as you discussed at the beginning or the opening, unquestionably, for me at least, and many others who are whale and dolphin communicators, the dolphins and whales are moving into a position of importance at this time on our planet. They have been in many other civilizations and moments, such as in Atlantis. And it seems to me that these are extremely high conscious beings, and that their role at this time on the planet is multi. One is to help awaken humanity, and very important is their job of, let's say, holding the frequencies of the oceans in balance. Shall I elaborate on that?
By all means.
All right. If we consider that the Earth is a living, conscious being, and we know that the waters of the planet are about 75 to 80% of the planet, I'm sure you're very well aware of Emoto's work teaching people about the conscious nature of water.
Yes. I'm just going to be on mute. I had to unmute myself. Yeah, I definitely. Okay. And it's a shame I shouldn't say it's a shame he passed away. He's gone to a better place because we're all infinite consciousness. So he basically did himself a favor by dying in that sense. I don't know. I'm sorry if you think I'm saying that. But I know some people might find that a bad thing to say. But, hey, I am very familiar with his work. I respect what he's done. And he's proved that, hey, water has consciousness. And if water has consciousness, then, well, so does pretty much everything now, doesn't it?
Well, everything does, of course, because everything is creation. And so, but if you're talking about water particularly, water, I think, is the more essential requirement for life than any other element. So the planet is 75 to 80% water. We are 75% to 80% water. And what is holding the frequencies of the oceans, which are the emotional body of the planet, because we attribute, in all esoteric work, we attribute water with the quality of emotion. What is holding it in balance? Well, I and others believe that the whales and dolphins' music, clicks, sounds, are part of a symphonic balancing of the Earth's emotional body. And this is a remarkable idea, but it's not that hard to imagine, because we know, for example, that the humpback whales' voices, their calls, their music can be heard even 1,000 miles away, and that they can sing 35, 40 minutes without repeating a melody or a refrain. And there are definitely musical qualities to these songs that denote orchestration on some level. So the question is, why are they singing these melodies, these complex musical sounds? And are they, what is the purpose besides mating, and what the marine biologists say is about mating, it's about hunting and whatever, but we don't really believe that. I think there's much more to it. I think that they are singing the oceans alive, and also, in keeping with the wonderful work of Emoto, they may very well be speaking to the molecular nature of the water and reminding the water of its perfection through sound. And so, knowing what so many wonderful people are doing, learning and teaching about sound and the effect of sound on consciousness and creation, this really makes sense to me.
Yeah, thanks. One thing about you saying Earth being mostly water, well, it's not 75% water in the sense that, well, the inside of the Earth is water. I mean, it's not like it. Well, actually, the inside of the Earth, maybe we'll talk about the hollow Earth theory later on in the interview. But I do remember Andromeda Council contacted Tolek in one of his recent interviews, saying that one reason extraterrestrials are so interested in Earth, aside from the fact that humans are genetic royalty and have multiple genes of many ET races, is because Earth, compared to many other planets in the universe, has a very high water content. Well, that's kind of interesting, because I remember reading in a science book, I don't remember what the book was called, it was many years ago, that I was reading, in which it was a mainstream science book, so I will say there are a few flaws with it, but the author of this book said a lot of ETs would be kind of shocked that we are living on a planet like Earth. This is a planet that doesn't want us living here because, well, among other things, water is not really a fluid or a liquid that you would think would be conducive with life because, well, put a lot of things in water, it will dissolve, and there's a lot of other liquids that things don't dissolve in it like that. It's like a fluid that wants to tear you apart, if you will, and he said for that reason he finds it kind of understandable that ETs would find it ridiculous that we would want to live on this planet, and yet, well, like I said, Tolek and his Andromeda Council contacts, they know water is the reason they're so interested in it. So in regards to this issue of a debate, if you will, if ETs would be interested in us because we have water, or they think we shouldn't be living here because there's a lot of water, what do you have to say about this little debate that I've just raised?
It's not a little debate, and thank you for raising it. First of all, depends on what kind of ETs we're talking about, because as you were talking about the polarity of the third dimension, we can assume or contemplate that we've got, let's say, not well-intended extraterrestrial influence on this planet and higher or well-intended ETs that are trying to at least monitor, if not serve in some way to assist us in getting through a lot of what's going on the planet right now. First of all, I don't agree that there are a lot of planets. I'm finding that more and more every day in the true disclosure process that's going on, which is not the one that's going to be called for by governments to come out and state their claims, but is rather a perpetual, deliberate massaging of the mass mind into accepting piece by piece this big puzzle that's being laid out for us so that we can embrace life beyond. That we're hearing more and more about planets that are water-bearing, and we're told now that there's water on Mars, there's water on the Moon, there's water on Sirius, there's water on, Europa. And even though the quality of the water may differ, for example, we're being told the water on Europa may be methane, we're still water everywhere is being discussed openly. And I have no trouble believing that there are thousands of Earth-like planets, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions perhaps, and that water is abundant in the universe. Asteroids have water, for God's sakes, right? So I think that the interest in this planet is multifold, and that, yes, one of them surely is because of the abundance of water and the life forms, the abundance and variety of life forms on the planet. But I think that primarily the interest on the Earth is twofold. One, the experiment of the human Homo sapiens being created to be raised on this planet, nurtured and seeded on this planet, and how that has developed. And two, the extraordinary mineral content of this planet. I think these are the two primary factors of why there's so much interest in what's going on here.
Right. And one thing I remember you saying in your Alfred Weber interview is you simply cannot imagine that the powers that be could take over the world entirely and fulfill their mission of the New World Order fully. Well, apparently you have no reason to believe that they would, because getting back to George Kavassalis in my radio interview with him, I did remind him that in a radio show he did many years, well, not many years ago, but several years ago, where he said, don't worry about the New World Order. It will never be able to fulfill its global totalitarian government plot on planet Earth. That is impossible. And I asked him, okay, so how can you confirm that? And the answer he gave me was, I have felt within my heart, soul, essence that Mother Earth is a love-based energy entity. Therefore, it is impossible for entities that are not love-based to take over this planet. Don't get me wrong, there are times when the New World Order may seem to come down hard, and nowadays that's not going to happen as easily because we're on a positive timeline, but there are times where it would seem to come down hard, but it would never be able to fulfill because we are a love-based energy planet. And of course, if you subscribe to the claim that infinite love is the only truth, everything else, including fear, is an illusion, well, then you would have to think that what Cavazos says about Earth would apply to everything throughout infinite consciousness. So this idea that they can't take over the Earth because we're love-based, and also the idea that everything would be love-based because infinite love is the only truth, what do you have to say about that?
I think they're doing a pretty good job of hearing that they're taking over the planet, and they are operating from such an extreme place of fear of losing the power that they are exposing themselves more and more and more, and that's why we're getting more and more extreme behavior from them. And every day we hear about more control systems and the fear machinery. I can't imagine it being in any higher pitch than it is now. Now, of course, the big one is, World War III with Russia. Are they going to nuke the planet and blah, blah, blah. Oh, and then let's not forget CERN, the colloid. I can never pronounce that. CERN, the Hadron Collider.
Large Hadron Collider. I think that's what it's called.
Thank you. Yeah, Hadron Collider, where they are planning to attempt a new Big Bang experience in the machinery. And will this create a new black hole, and will we all be sucked to it? And, bottom line is, unless we get a handle on our own immortality and understand immortality, then we probably are going to be in extreme duress for a very long time on this planet. When we grasp immortality in every sense, the fear dissipates because, for example, so what if they blow a hole in the fabric of time-space? Why does that mean that we're going to annihilate the planet? Couldn't that be a way that we are being released into a higher dimension? I think it's time for the human race, for those of us that are out here trying to bring, let's say, the nature of reality out to the public in new and exciting ways, that we turn around all these mechanisms of fear and look at them from another position. And that is, so here's an example. The Holiness Dalai Lama was once asked what he thought of the fact that India had now gotten the nuclear weapon. And he looks at the camera and he says, well, I think it's okay. Journalist just turned chartreuse and said, sorry, he said, well, who's to say who should have it and who should not? Perhaps if everybody has it, there'll be more balance. And in that tongue-in-cheek reply, I thought, well, brilliant on you, because these dualities, this polarity, the good and bad guys, the perpetuation of this constant struggle has humankind, I should say, because we don't want to have a gender pronoun or noun, but has humankind stuck in the concept of our ever-present danger, mortal danger. And yet, as we are in this passage of entry into a new realm, a new consciousness, the fifth sun of the Mayans, we really are in a position to be contemplating immortality. And that is something that no matter how hard they squeeze us, the more we allow ourselves to understand that and to contemplate what that is, what the next dimension is, the easier it'll be for us not to slip into those controls. I hope I'm not rambling and I'm making sense to you.
Oh, you're not going crazy. You're going sane in a crazy world. So you're allowed to sound as crazy as you want on this show, because we have to expose
I didn't sound crazy. I just don't want to ramble, because sometimes, I'm trying to express a point and I find myself, as many people, sort of out on a cliff thinking, where was I going with this? but hopefully I did make my point. I just think it's really vital to us now at a point where we are every moment being faced with our death, with mortality, with the destruction of whatever, that we just take ourselves past that and think, so great. So what if they blow up the planet? So what if they nuke the planet? Number one, the Earth will always survive. Even if they nuke the planet, it will always survive because you cannot destroy.
You still there? Because your voice just echoed off in the distance. You there, Patricia? Hello? Patricia?
A lot of what my work is about. Yep.
Patricia, you were quiet for about 5 seconds. I don't know what the hell just happened there, but could you just repeat what you said for the past 15 seconds? Because you blocked out somehow.
Oh, boy. I was saying, regardless of what can be done, nuclear, hadron collider, the destruction of our ecosystems, whatever they do, and by the way, we can't always give the total blame to the rulers on this planet because we're contributing to a lot of the destruction on the planet. Regardless, whatever is done, the Earth will always survive. The Earth will reboot and life will continue. I hope you agree with that.
Oh, yeah, life will definitely continue. There is no death because we're all infinite consciousness.
Right,
I don't believe in the Big Bang. You said they're going to create a new Big Bang at CERN. Well, I don't believe there was any sort of a Big Bang in the sense that we're being told. I mean, I believe that there's timeline genocides where many timelines come together. That could be considered a Big Bang by some, like we had a massive timeline genocide 54 million years ago for one. So, but just for the hell of it, I might as well ask you, do you think the idea of the Big Bang is all a bunch of bullocks, as they say in the British Isles?
I just was speaking to a British friend who said it's a bunch of bullocks, so that's why I laughed.
Well, actually, I got that from David Icke's book, The Perception Deception. There is a chapter in that book called Big Bang Bullocks where he gives his theories as to why it is bullocks. But anyway, do you think it is bullocks?
Yeah, I think that everything exists, always has, always does, always will, and that everything is in a state of perpetual transformation and transmutation. I also believe in parallel timelines. I also believe in parallel realities, parallel universes, and simultaneous time. So these are concepts that are contrary to the idea that something has to have a beginning. And by nature of that reality or that mind construct, there was a beginning, and it's called the Big Bang. And by nature of that mindset, people who believe that there has to be an end. And I don't believe in endings. I believe in transmutation. So what is transmutation? Reorganization of energy in another location, another space, another dimension, another density. And I know that the soul is immortal. I am fearless about death because I've been on the other side. I've had past near-death experiences, and I've had some pretty jolting psychic experiences where I've been in some other place. Let's call it another dimension. And so I think that part of what we're going through now is this enormity of information, this flood of information, some incredible channeled information and some of it bullocks, but such an enormity of information that we are just overwhelmed by what we're hearing and what we're experiencing. And hopefully, in this process of trying to filter through all of this, we are reaching more and more awareness and consciousness of our immortality. And when we do that, then we can perceive everything that looks like the end of the world, danger, our imminent destruction as a simple catalyst, if you will, for moving into another dimension, another reality, another density, whatever you perceive that to be. And let me just close with this thought. Perhaps something like a nuclear explosion, or I can't even think of all the horrors that they're inventing. Perhaps, if you really want to go to the optimism place, perhaps these very things are going to trigger our being able to make that leap.
Right. I just said a couple minutes ago that if love is the only truth, everything, including fear, is an illusion. Might as well bring that up in discussion because there are some people, some guests that I had on my show who I brought that up in conversation with, and they disagree. They say, I do not think that's a good way of looking at it. From my point of view, it makes no sense to say that fear is an illusion. That may not be the case in dimensions or densities of consciousness higher than the one we're in, but in this one, it doesn't make sense to say fear is an illusion. I mean, Dolores Cannon has, the late Dolores Cannon, she often said fear is an illusion. But do you agree or disagree? Just asking for the hell of it.
Oh, these are some very profound questions. I don't want to just blurt out an answer. I want to contemplate that. Fear is an illusion. I think that being manipulated into a fear-based reaction is a process of being deluded, and that it's very important now that we can detach, we can observe with great detachment how mechanisms are being put in place to keep us in fear. And you and I, and many others, are doing everything we can to help people not to be fooled. Like you were talking about Isis. You know, you have to laugh about Isis because, of course, Isis is the goddess of love in the Egyptian arena. And what a clever name to use for the terrorists of the moment. But back to the question. Is it an illusion? I think it's when it's a response to manipulation, I think it's a delusion, and that people need to stand in their power. One of the biggest thing I'm trying to do on this in my work is help people stay out of fear, how to recognize how it is being inculcated in the human spirit, and then how to step back from the delusion and from the mechanism, if you will, of burying the human race in subservience by presenting the ever-present, ubiquitous danger that only they can protect us from. And that this is, I think it's delusion more than illusion. And when people can look at it clearly and step back, that's when they get their power back, and then that's when they're out of illusion or delusion and seeing much more clearly. And with that, you regain your power.
Okay, let's get back to dolphins and whales for a moment. You do subscribe, or do you subscribe to the idea that dolphins and whales are members on extraterrestrial councils like the Galactic Federation or the Andromeda Council? Maybe not those ones in particular, but there are ET councils on there, and I have heard people say that there are dolphins and whales on those councils, although I don't know if they mentioned that they were third-dimensional dolphins and whales like the ones we would see here on Earth. You would think that they would be a higher-level consciousness one than the ones we normally see in the oceans. But do you think that there are dolphins and whales and ET councils out there?
Absolutely. In fact, in my book, Before We Leave You, Messages from the Great Whales and Dolphins, they explain this in great clarity, that the higher conscious dolphins and whales sit on various ET councils, and that they are operating. Some of them are without body, because if we're trying to understand these 6th, 7th, 8th dimensional beings, they're no longer physical beings. So they're operating in the energy of that, let's say, greater community of wisdom and intelligence and higher consciousness, but not necessarily in body. And I absolutely do believe that dolphins and whales exist on many dimensions, and that they are also, not only are they the weavers of the sound of the music of the oceans, but that they are also weaving the fabric of the cosmic sea. And that, of course, that would sound like I'm saying they're swimming around the universe or the cosmos. And what I mean by that is rather they are the keepers of the musical harmonies that hold the cosmic threads together, if that makes sense to who's listening. And that they do also contribute to the incredible support and wisdom that we're getting on so many levels from so many different councils. And one of these councils is the Sirian High Council, and there is a committee of whales and dolphins that sits on that council, and they call themselves the Kikwoki.
And what ET contactee is it that told you that?
I work with the Sirian High Council, and I've been channeling for them since 1996. And I now have, 11 books out? And the first 3 books are called the Sirian Revelations. And interestingly enough, what you were talking about with regard to guns and ETs talking that we should keep our guns, in one of those books they say, bear in mind that when you give up your right to hold arms, you are yielding completely to the power. So that is a recurring, let's say, validation for what you've said about Alex Collier's work. And I got some static from that from people who said, yeah, right, higher ETs telling us to have guns. But that's not the point of the message. The message is that liberty keeps your runaway government in check. And once you give that up, there'll be totalitarian, absolute dictatorship on this planet.
No question, and Founding Fathers understood that. That's why they put the Second Amendment in there. In regards to your work saving dolphins and whales and keeping people from hunting them, somewhat related to this issue, I used to be a fan of the TV series South Park. I don't watch it anymore, but there was an episode where they made a mockery of how the Japanese seem to like to kill dolphins and whales a lot. Well, I'm not even going to bother getting into why they, in the episode, said they hate it. It's absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, in reality, maybe you could tell people the truth as to if there is some truth to the claim that the Japanese do a lot of dolphin and whale hunting. Could you perhaps tell us why they do that, and also tell us what you do to keep dolphins and whales from dying, and also tell us what we can do to keep dolphins and whales from dying?
Yeah, the Japanese are really probably the worst culprits on the planet, although there are other nations that continue to hunt and kill, like Iceland. Too bad, because Iceland is doing so much to be a leader in so many ways of breaking free of the one world order, but they still slaughter whales, and they sell whale burger meat in relative hamburger-type shops in that country. The Japanese, of course, their diet is primarily fish, to which they attribute the whale and the dolphin. So their primary reason for killing dolphins is for food. However, they make a lot of money rounding them up and slaughtering the mothers and then taking the calves and shipping them out to SeaWorlds. So this is a primary issue that I'm fighting for, and that is to stop people, to convince people, to make them understand that SeaWorlds are perpetuating the death and destruction of, decimating the dolphin colonies. As far as whale meat, I'm appalled to tell you that the value of a whale, of a minke whale, is over $1 million. Between the meat and whatever else they use the whale for, because the blubber, all of these things are utilized for different products. Whales are extremely valuable, very commercialized, and Japan is the leader in the commercialization of those beautiful beings. So they still go out in their boats called research boats, and they still pull these incredible beings out of the water and slaughter them, usually alive. They cut them from throat down to the flukes, with no regard for the suffering at all. And then these beautiful beasts become fodder for dog food. The better examples go into sushi and all manner of foods. So, again, in my book, Before We Leave You, it talks about the whale saying, how can you allow us to be utilized to feed your domesticated animals? Is that all that we're worth to you? And it's a horrifying reality that I can't get my head around the fact that when dogs will eat spaghetti and crumbs and just about anything you'll feed them, we're killing and destroying whales to put the meat in dog food. So as a researcher and as the CEO of Save Earth's Oceans, which is a nonprofit organization I co-founded in 2012, I'm trying to understand and do something about this. And it's a huge issue because now the Japanese are so locked into their position. Their antagonism also stems from the fact that there is so much hostility against them globally that they've sort of dug into their position, and we have a right, and this is our custom, and nobody's going to stop us. Now, there are some organizations that are doing some very interesting work to try to educate them. One of them is an organization called Blue Voice, and the director is Harvey Jones. And his approach is to try to educate these to the fact that eating dolphin meat and eating whale meat is the most toxic thing you can do for your body. So he's educating them, teaching them about the mercury levels and now the radiation levels in these bigger animals, and the fact that the bigger they are, the older they are, the more toxic they are to eat, hoping that enough of a campaign will sway the public and start to reduce the desire, the demand for this meat. But that is the higher, let's say, the worst use of whale and dolphins is for food. Now, my question is, all right, so now you've got toxic mercury levels in the stratosphere, and what about all the radiation? Because we could talk your whole show about Fukushima and the radiation levels. The whales and dolphins are now just vessels of radiation. I mean, what is going on? Why don't the Japanese get this? I don't have an answer for that. I think they're dug in to their position that, and also knowing the Japanese culture, which is very, I don't want to be offensive, but let's say very traditional, very male-dominant, and not about to yield to public pressure. So this is an ongoing work. The only way this is going to change, I believe, like Hardy Jones, is by educating the people that by killing the whales and dolphins, they're killing themselves.
All right, thanks. And by the way, you said eating dolphin and whale meat is toxic. Well, muscle tissue is actually toxic. We're supposed to be herbivores, but most of us are omnivores. It's interesting, if you watch a lion eat the prey that it kills, the lion goes through all sorts of trouble to rip apart the animal just to get everything except the muscle tissue that's edible. And the reason the lion does that is because muscle tissue is toxic, and yet we actually eat it. Well, I just want to throw that out. I don't want to turn people into herbivores. I mean, if you like to eat meat, people have said you should be very caring about your animals, because the more caring you are, the better the food will be. And people say, one of the best ways if you're going to eat meat, the best way to kill an animal is, an analogy I like to use is the book of Mice and Men. At the end of the book, when George killed his friend Lenny, he made sure Lenny died happy. So he said the word rabbits because he knew Lenny loved rabbits. And then when Lenny wasn't watching, right after he heard the word rabbits, he shot him in the back of the head, and he knew that he died a happy man because the last word he heard was rabbits. The point I'm trying to make is, if you're going to kill an animal to eat it for meat, make sure you treat the animal well and make sure you kill the animal in a nice way. And other people would say, well, I don't see any difference between eating dolphins and eating flounder or any other seafood, or for that matter, any type of meat. And some people would take it even further by saying plants have consciousness just like animals, so I don't see any difference between eating plants and animals. Now that I've brought all this stuff up about the best way to kill an animal and whether or not there's any difference between consciousness of animals and plants, so there's no reason for us to feel bad about what we eat, what do you have to say about all this?
Well, for starters, I'm a vegetarian for 27 years, so have a lot of opinions about this, and I tread on this very delicately because I don't want to alienate people who are meat eaters, and I don't want to preach to people. So that said, here's what I have to say. There's no kind way to kill a living being. And as long as we believe that myth, I don't know that we'll ever see war end on this planet, because we're able to justify killing when it's convenient to us. So it's okay to kill an innocent animal because we're going to eat it because we need to eat meat. But as long as we kill it nicely, that's okay. And that's ridiculous. And what's the difference between that and saying, well, I don't really want to kill a man, but if he's my enemy and if he wants to harm me or my country, then it's okay. This system of rationalization is why we're in the mess we're in. And the bottom line is, I believe that we shouldn't kill any animals. We, first of all, shouldn't raise animals because to eat, for example, cows, because we're destroying the planet trying to keep these cows fed. And not to mention the poisons and toxins and growth hormones and antibiotics and all the other crap that they're being fed to keep them relatively healthy enough for us to eat. With regard to the question of, well, plants are living things too, that's very valid. And my answer to that is, the difference is plants keep regenerating when you eat their food. If you have an apple tree and you pick an apple, the plant doesn't die. If you have lettuce plants and you cut off the lettuce, it keeps growing more lettuce. So it's a question of rationalization, perhaps, but I think that each of us has a responsibility to do the best we can, and that rationalizing, I hear people tell me, well, I only eat organic meat, or I only eat animals that have been killed with kindness, and I'm just like, really? How kind is it to kill an animal so that you can have roast lamb's chops on your plate? And if we can make killing okay because it serves us, then how are we ever going to stop war? So here's my question for the public. How do we really look at this issue without everybody getting up their backs up because they're meat eaters and they don't want to be told they can't eat meat? Because that's not my point here. My question is, how do we address this question with kindness and a great thought about what we really are doing? Are we, by ingesting the blood of animals, perpetuating the bloodthirst? And I believe we are, and so do other people who are vegetarians and Buddhists. I think that the more we are anesthetized to killing for food, the more we're anesthetized to killing for whatever other excuse there is, war, the patria, safety, or whatever. And that we need to look at that. And another thing I want to add to that is, we go to the grocery store, there are all these neat little plastic packages filled with dyed, ground legs of lamb, ground meat, whatever, neatly packaged, and we are anesthetized to the reality that there's a dead animal in that package. It's been pumped up with dye to make it look like it's healthy, but it's dead, and it's been dead. And here's another question for the meat eaters, and it's like, how good is it for us to be ingesting dead animal flesh? So I hope I'm not getting anybody's gander up by bringing this up, since you're the one that brought it up. And all I do is not to preach about it, but when I am asked about it, I invite people to consider that. Is this part of what our problem on this planet is? And to each his own to find the answer to that question.
Thank you for giving your take on your Patricia. Some will agree to disagree, but hey, that's their issue. So I'd like to get into something, man. I was waiting to get into this subject on this show, the whole subject of how you have picked up where Zecharia Sitchin left off in regards to your talk about the Anunnaki and Nibiru. Now, before I give you the chance to give your side of the story here, I would like to say something that I have made a regular habit of talking about on my radio show. I am on a little bit of a mission of sorts to debunk any notion that Zecharia Sitchin was a fraud, and I know he wasn't a fraud because, well, okay, here's the deal. Andrew Bartzis, Akashic Records reader and my favorite source of information because of his Akashic Records reading skills, probably being one of the best sources out there for information, said in part 2 of a 20-part series that you can find on the Creating 5D YouTube channel about galactic history. He was talking about this, and he mentioned that Zecharia Sitchin's first 3 books in terms of the events are very, very accurate, but his timelines are off because there are many different timelines coming together on Earth, and that would, for reasons he didn't really elaborate on, cause timelines, exact dates and all to be thrown off, even though he got his events right. He did talk about how Nibiru, and I'm reading off my notes here, is a free-roaming galactic entity planet. It has a drive in that it requires no solar system to support it. It has a dimensional drive and not a unity consciousness drive like Earth. Nibiru's consciousness just needs leadership society to function psychically with crystalline technology of the dimensional drive so they can go anywhere they want and do what is within their free will. Let me just sidetrack from my notes here for a moment. After Bartzis said that Sitchin's books were very accurate, I was instantly thrown off because I remembered a few sources out there talking about how Sitchin was a fraud. First of all, Leo Zagami in his Project Camelot interview, former 33rd degree Freemason Leo Zagami turned whistleblower, said that Sitchin was an Illuminati disinfo agent and the Vatican helped him write his work. And in David Icke's Revelations of a Mother Goddess documentary, Arizona Wilder, a former mind control Illuminati slave, said that she saw Sitchin at satanic Illuminati rituals. She said he was actually a shape-shifting reptilian alien, and David Icke said, well, that might explain why Sitchin warned me not to talk about reptilian aliens in my work after I asked him why he never said anything about reptilian aliens in his work, in spite of the countless serpent and reptilian alien motifs from ancient Sumeria. Well, when I met Andrew Bartzis at the In5D Return to Atlantis conference in Sarasota, Florida in October 2013, I asked him, I brought this to his attention, and I told him, could you please explain to me how Zecharia Sitchin could have been accurate if he was literally an extraterrestrial disinformer? And Andrew Bartzis told me, now take a deep breath because we're going to jump off into the deep end here, he told me that timeline watcher entities who have the ability to manipulate through someone's spiritual body essence and their physical body essence to cause them to perceive events differently and make them think that they're on an alternate timeline, those timeline watchers caused Leo Zagami, Arizona Wilder, and even a few other people to think that Sitchin was a fraud because they were put on an alternate timeline against their will, which caused them to spew out disinformation about Sitchin, which they thought was true. And believe me, I wish the world wasn't this complicated, but like it or not, this is how reality works because the Akashic Records say it. Now, this explains why David Icke always says that the Anunnaki were the reptilian aliens because, well, he believes Sitchin was a fraud because Arizona Wilder told him that. Well, how about that? And I just want to finish up quickly here. I'll give you the chance in a moment. But Andrew Bartzis did say that the Anunnaki, they were actually not here on a mission. They were lured to Earth by a multidimensional being in charge of the Arab countries. And they came to Earth. The Anunnaki were trapped in the Earth's reincarnation cycle. And the Anunnaki did create humans as a slave species, but the goal was not to shield the atmosphere of Nibiru. It was actually to lure other entities to planet Earth. So I've babbled long enough, Patricia. Now that I've debunked the notion that Sitchin was a fraud and also told you a couple of things that Sitchin was wrong about, what do you have to say about this? And then after that, you can give your take on the Anunnaki, Nibiru, and all that stuff you talked about, how where you picked off where Sitchin left off.
Well, I would like to start by saying that it really disturbs me to hear people who are, let's call it, reputable whistleblowers or voices for alternative media, decrying other contributors to the common knowledge as frauds or liars or cons or scams, because it immediately sends an alarm to me about the person making the accusation. because when we're talking about multidimensional reality, we're not going to have any right answers here. We are treading in some very new, immense waters and experiences that probably the human race hasn't seen for 10,000 years. We had alien intervention in other civilizations like Egypt and the Mayas and Atlantis and yada yada. So to hear anyone say, well, he's a fraud because he said this and that, is very discouraging to me. And what I say to people about that is take it with a grain of salt, because anyone who will immediately attack any other person who is trying to make sense out of this confusion is to be questioned. That is my rule of thumb. As far as Sitchin being a what was he called? An alien? No.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have to understand those people that Leo Zagami and Arizona Wilder, the reason they said that Sitchin was a disinfo agent and a reptilian alien, the reason they thought that was true is because they were manipulated into thinking they were on an alternate timeline, which caused them to spew out disinformation about Sitchin being a disinfo agent, which they thought was true. It sounds crazy, but that's what Andrew Bartz has told me is the reason they lied about Sitchin when they thought they were telling the truth.
Okay, everything you just said was statically removed from my conversation.
Oh, sorry about that. What I said was Andrew Bartz has told me that Arizona Wilder and Leo Zagami, Arizona Wilder was the one that told David Icke that Sitchin was a reptilian alien who had the job of disinforming about the reptilians and the Illuminati, and Leo Zagami, he said Sitchin was a Illuminati disinfo agent who got help from the Vatican. They thought that was true, even though it wasn't true, but the reason they thought it was true was because timeline watcher entities caused them to think that they were on an alternate timeline, which made them think that Sitchin was a fraud. Andrew Bartz has explained in some... my God, Patricia Cori has just got knocked off the air. Are they trying to keep us from knowing this? Hang on a minute. Let me... Let's get her back on. Are they trying to knock us off so we don't talk about this subject? Call back in, please. She's about to write. We have total interference. Wow. Is the NSA trying to keep us from writing NSA manipulation, maybe? Try calling in again. All right, let's see if she gets in here. I don't know. Of all the subjects that we could have been discussing, for us to have total interference and not be able to communicate with each other, it was this one subject that I was really, really waiting to... All right, here she is. All right, Patricia, can you hear me? You're on the air.
Yes, I can.
Okay, I hate to think the NSA is trying to block our signal here, but of all the things that we're talking about on this show, you could imagine if they wanted to block out one thing, it would be this subject. But let me know if we have interference again. I've said it twice, but I'll say it again. The reason that Leo Zagami...
you don't need to repeat it to me because I did hear it the first time. So my answer to that is, okay, great. So in other words, anything that anybody says can be dismissed because they were being influenced by mind control or displaced on a incorrect timeline we're using a lot of we're hearing a lot of gibberish that dismisses anybody from taking a position and honoring and committing to their position. It's very easy to say, well, when I said that, I didn't realize that I was being influenced by A, B, C, or D. I think that, first of all, anybody that is prepared to denounce another teacher, writer, leader, etc., needs to own up to it completely or shut up, number one. Number two, that Sitchin or anybody else was participating in satanic rituals. Anything is possible in this extreme duality that we're in right now. But for God's sakes, let's look at the body of work of this man and honor the incredible wisdom that he's brought through. Is it 100% accurate? Maybe, maybe not. That's not the point. The point is you look at a body of work, you look at the intent of the person bringing through the work, you look at the proof as much as is available of the work, And, you have to assess it for yourself. And there are things about Sitchin's work that I absolutely adore and relate to, and there are other areas where I don't agree or the information that I have is different, but that doesn't mean for any reason that I would denounce him as being false. It simply means that his deductions lead in another direction and mine lean in another direction, and yet all of these contributions add up to what we're trying to create, which is a multidimensional puzzle of the holographic universe. So I don't like hearing people denouncing whatever the excuse is, whatever the reason is. Let's get more focused on what we can contribute and less focused what's wrong about the other guy.
Okay, thanks for giving your take on that. So, so we can assume Sitchin was not a fraud, but there were a couple of things he was wrong about. Let me just quickly reiterate those things. The Anunnaki, they did not come here on a mission. They were lured to Earth because Andrew Bartzis has talked about how the entities that are in charge of all the evil, including the Illuminati that's going on Earth, are known as the 15 beings. And actually there's, I think, 8 beings now because all the remaining 7 underwent service to self-ascension. That's what he says. So now there's only 8 beings, but there were 15 beings, and one of those beings was in charge of the Arab countries that being lured the Anunnaki to Earth. The Anunnaki were trapped into the Earth's reincarnation cycle. He also said that this was after the fall of Lemuria about 480,000 years ago. So there was nothing basically left on Earth except Homo erectus. And the Anunnaki realized that Homo erectus had DNA links to them. The Anunnaki understood the importance of DNA skin suits, and the Anunnaki implanted their soul codes into the Homo erectus to create Homo sapiens. And Bartzis said the energy in the gold that they had humans mine needed to go somewhere else, so Earth-based souls that migrated away from Earth would sense the energy of the gold somewhere else and be lured back to the machine on Earth. So that is what the gold was used for. It was not to shield the atmosphere of Nibiru. And again, I'm getting my information here from an Akashic Records reader. So the Anunnaki, he's saying they're innocent pawns in a game of manipulation and also DNA genetic engineering in this sense because of what happened to humans. So all this stuff I've just said about a couple of things that Sitchin was wrong about, do you think maybe there's truth to that?
Well, my information is different from that, what you've just said. And I have been working with the Syrian High Council for a very long time. And so a lot of the information that I've gotten from them has been very prophetic and has come to pass because my first book, The Cosmos of Soul, was first channeled in 1996 and came out in 1999. And in that work, a lot of the information that was in that work is now reality in 2014-15. So my take on the Anunnaki is completely different. And it's going to take me about 5 minutes to explain it if you are comfortable with me taking that much time to
You got the floor. Go ahead.
Okay. According to the Syrian High Council, Syrian star system is comprised of 3 stars, which we have labeled Sirius A, B, and C, and which they call Sothis, Cetus, and Cetus is Sirius A, and this star is the one that we see at the bottom of Orion's belt on the horizon, the bright blue star that we love and admire so much. Sirius B, Sothis, was in 3D reality, and it was it advanced and ascended to the 6th dimension. And these are the beings that I'm in touch with and I've been working with for 20 years now. Sirius C ascended to the 4th dimension, and herein lies the trouble. This star was called an Anu. It's still in the 4th dimension, and what happened when this star ascended by going through its own astral cords, it didn't, one planet in that star system was Nibiru, and it wasn't developed enough to be able to make it through the ascension process. So when the star was going through ascension, Nibiru was kicked out, expelled, as the Syrians say, and it was pulled back into the magnetic force of Sirius A, the 3D star in Sirius, and then because it couldn't hold orbit, it was flung out into space and started to rotate between our star, which is called Ra, and Sirius, and has been in this orbit for 500,000 years. So this is very interesting because Sitchin has talked about Nibiru, or Planet X, coming into our star system, but he never talks about where it comes from and why. And the Syrians say it's because this star is on this trajectory, stuck between these two star systems and struggling to survive, and it's an underground civilization. And the rulers of of civilization are the Anunnaki. And that at one point, are you still with me?
Yeah, yes, I am. I'm on mute, but I'm still here.
All right. At one point, they were able to grab onto the Earth, and came to the Earth not necessarily with the evil intention that we're hearing about, the reptilian, horrible, evil, super evil descriptions of these beings, but they came here because they're trying to survive. They're trying to mine the planet for gold, which is a recurring reference, but because they're trying to fuel that planet to survive. And then the book gets into a lofty description about how they're trying to lasso the Earth, because at this moment, unlike books or information that Planet X is in our solar system, the Syrians say this planet is stuck between the two stars, and they're trying to make it back into our solar system in time for our own star to ascend. And this is a very complex idea, and people can read about it in my book, Atlantis Rising. But it differs somewhat from Sitchin's idea. And yet, the idea that the Anu are the rulers on this planet is a dominant theme in my work. And that, no, there are more than 15 of them. There are 2,000 of them in this ruling class. And so therein lies the problem. So, who is right about this? I can't even... Who knows who's right or wrong? Is there a right or wrong? Are these many approaches all holding some validity about the situation? One thing's for sure. There is a ruling class on this planet that is of a reptilian nature and that is determined to, it looks like they're determined to destroy the planet.
Right. Want to touch on that for just a moment. I said David Icke. He always says the Anunnaki were reptilian aliens, but you have to understand he was duped into thinking that Sitchin was a fraud by a Illuminati slave who was put on an alternate timeline against her will. Well, in my understanding, and many people would also say, well, the Anunnaki and the reptilian aliens, they're two different extraterrestrial entities, but they did interbreed with each other. The Anunnaki, which are human giants, if you will, as Sitchin has talked about, they interbred with the reptilians that David Icke has talked about, and they are the ones at the top of the Illuminati ladder of authority. And some people say, well, it's not the reptilians that are at the top of the Illuminati authority ladder, it's the Anunnaki, because the term Anunnaki refers to the children of a universal geneticist entity, and the Anunnaki from Nibiru are just one faction of Anunnaki, and the fact that they're the children of a universal geneticist entity means that they're the ones who are the responsible for the genetic traits that make up the Illuminati bloodlines, or so the theory goes. The reptilian aliens are just using them as conduits of sorts. So do you think maybe there is truth to that idea?
Yeah, that works for me. The question now is, more than trying to determine who they are and where they're from, is what their agenda is for this planet, and what the we need to understand what they really intend to do here so that we can counteract that intention. So, okay, we know that they're the Illuminati. Then we know the Illuminati agenda. We know the World Order agenda. What is the ultimate outcome that they intend for this planet?
Well, the ultimate outcome, well, that's debatable. Some people would say it would be depopulation, but Akashic Records editor Andrew Bartzis, he said, no, it's not that. That's what the minority of the Illuminati factions want. The majority, they would prefer to not exterminate us. They would prefer to microchip all of us to take away our free will, and then take away our free will and then convert us into a cosmic war machine, use us as soldiers in a cosmic war machine to form a galactic empire, and they wouldn't want to depopulate us because that means less soldiers for their galactic empire. They just want to microchip us. That's what the Archon control system's ultimate goal is, as Bartzis says. Do you think maybe there's some truth to that?
I do. I think that what we need to do is look at the unfolding of this reality, because even the idea of are they trying to depopulate us, that's not the end goal. So we have to ask ourselves, if we're ever going to get a handle around what this is really about, is what is their end goal? All right, so to say they want to depopulate the population, why? What would their end goal be? And the obvious destruction, deliberate destruction of the ecosystems. There's no question that the Gulf was deliberate. The radiation from Fukushima is deliberate. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. In my interview with Alfred Weber in the first hour, we talked all about how Fukushima is a global extinction event, and the ETs are actually going to great lengths to try to keep us safe from it. Thank you, ETs. We love you for that. But, yeah, I do agree with you, yeah.
All right. So the question is why? Why do they, aside from trying to, because the radiation, proliferation of radiation on the planet is not going to just destroy the human race. It's going to destroy almost all life on the planet. I think the cockroaches will survive. There will be fungi that thrive on it, and yada yada, and eventually Earth will be transformed maybe into something different, but it will still remain alive. But the question is, why are they deliberately massively destroying our ecosystem? So again, it's not just about killing off the human race. They're destroying everything. Why? Now, when I looked at the Gulf situation, and here we might hear some static again, so let's be prepared for that. What struck me immediately about the Gulf situation was, I get it. So we're turning the ocean into a giant fueling chemical soup tank. Because between Corexit and the fact that the deliberate, that, as far as I'm concerned, that was a deliberate event, and the spraying of Corexit all over the ocean there, and the perpetual release of morphine. The Horizon event has never been sealed. The leaks are still there. Leaks of gas fuel are still pouring into the ocean, and we don't talk about it, of course, because it's a no-no. But it's a very deliberate decision to destroy that part of the ocean. And it looks like it's being turned into a chemical petrol soup tank for whatever purposes are their end goal. And that's why I like to get people back around to that, so that instead of getting our mental masturbation about where are they from, why, who are they, how do they interbreed, the bigger question here is, what is their agenda for the planet? Because if we can't figure that out, we're never going to be able to stop them. So we've got the deliberate destruction of the Gulf, which has totally affected the weather, as well as the chemtrails, which is another whole subject. We have Fukushima, which, just like the Gulf, the government said, well, hands off, the company has to be in charge of fixing this. And TEPCO has been totally, 4 years now? Bungling. Let's remember the ice wall idea. Then there was, let's put sawdust on it. And 4 years later, it's completely out of control. and the planet is being bathed in radiation. The oceans are being filled with it. So without wanting to be a gloom and doom person here, which I am not, my question is this planet being prepared to be some sort of a fueling station, a barren fueling station with no interference from a civilization like the very intelligent human race, although we have questioned the intelligence levels lately? Is it being deliberately destroyed so that it can serve some other purpose, i.e., to be mined for all of the incredible minerals that are here? And I tend to think that that is the intention, more than the creation of a robot-obedient army. However, one only needs to look at what's going on in the military to see that that is already being put in place. I mean, our military are being turned into robots. So there's a very dark, we know this, and deliberate intention to mutate this planet. And I think that that's much more important than some of the other things that we're getting hung up on in our intelligence communities. How we're going to deal with that, how we're going to alter that, and how we're going to stop them from doing that is the question of the hour.
Right. But let's get away from that subject for a moment. I want to talk about a few things that you've picked up where Sitchin left off. I remember you talked about how you believe that the Anunnaki have connected a lasso of energy from Earth to Nibiru. Could you please talk about what that's all about?
Yeah, and interestingly enough, after that, I channeled that information. Years after, I read an article from NASA where they said that they were working on developing a way to lasso an asteroid and pull it into Earth's orbit. And I read it and went, whoa, because when you are a channel, a lot of the times you yield to the information, even though it's absurd or it feels absurd, because you trust the source. And so when it becomes validated in such a perfected way, it's very interesting. So way back when I first brought in that information, they said that because Nibiru is out there careening through space, dark space, between these two stars, they are trying to pull themselves back into orbit in time, into our solar system in time for what I believe is going to be the ascension of our entire solar system. And I also believe that that is one of the reasons why the planets in our solar system are acting so bizarrely, which many people are aware of. A lot of information of alterations and mutations in planetary behavior in our solar system. Okay, so according to the Sirian High Council, they have thrown an electromagnetic grid around this planet, which we're well aware of. And their intention is to reach a frequency by throwing the lasso. The Sirians mean they're trying to reach a frequency point by bringing the Earth down energetically to its lowest possible point that can reach resonance with their planet, which is a very low frequency planet, so that they can reach resonance, and hopefully people know what the concept of resonance means, and be able to ride their way through ascension. The problem is, if they bring the Earth down too low vibrationally, it won't make it through ascension, just like Nibiru didn't make it through ascension in its ascension process. Now, I know this sounds pretty out there, but then again, your show is out there, so hopefully I don't have to qualify it. But I really welcome people to read that book, Atlantis Rising, The Struggle of Darkness and Light, where this is explained in great detail and with clarity, and remind people that it has now been divulged by NASA that this is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to lasso an asteroid and pull it into Earth's orbit. These celestial machinations are reality in our galactic time of change on this planet.
Yeah, a couple of things about life on Nibiru for a moment. I remember Andromeda Council contactee Tolik saying that the Anunnaki are one of several different extraterrestrial races on Nibiru. It's not just them. You said the Anunnaki, they live underground. Well, that's kind of interesting because in my interview with John Lear, he talked about how we've been lied to about the nature of stars and how life can exist on planets. Stars, they're not powered by nuclear fusion. They're electromagnetic. To be specific, they're hotspots on a universal web of electromagnetic consciousness energy. And you could think of planets and moons as cold spots on this universal web. And the sun does not transfer heat to the planets. Instead, it transfers electromagnetic energy to the planets, and the planets have their own filtering system, especially in their atmospheres, which can convert the sun's electromagnetic energy into a form that can support life. And while this allows for life to exist on pretty much every planet, even gas giant planets have some form of life on them because this filtering system exists. And this implies that life can exist. It doesn't matter how big the planet is or how small it is or how far it is from a star, life can exist on it. And I have often said on my show, well, this can explain how the Anunnaki can survive on Nibiru, even though it's in a 3,600-year elliptical orbit. But you're telling me, no, even if this is true, that it wouldn't matter because they live under the surface of the Earth. I mean, under the surface of Nibiru. They really did say they could live under the surface, right? And by the way, do you subscribe to this thing that John Lear and also George Cavazos said? John Lear is right. That is how the universe works, that planets have filtering systems that allows for life to exist everywhere.
Yes, I think this is a very profound description. I believe that stars, we don't really understand the energy of stars. When you look at what's going on in our sun, when we see keyholes right through the sun and aberrations on the sun that defy anything to do with the description we've been given up until now, we know that we don't have a clear idea of what stars and suns are all about. So, yes, I agree that that's very possible that their description is more accurate. As far as the Nibiruans living on the surface through the cold night of space, that's possible, I suppose, but I am very comfortable with the idea that most planets, are capable of having thriving civilizations underground, to wit, one planet Earth. Letting go of the question of Agartha for a moment, this entire planet is one connected underground civilization. We have Cappadocia from the ancient Turks and the times of their tunnels dug out. Incredible quantity of people were able to survive under there. To the modern day cities. Look at Montreal. There's an entire city underground. I've been there. There are hotels, swimming pools, everything is connected by a metro system. The whole city can live underground, and they do when the winter is so cold that they can't come out. So most big apartment buildings in Montreal and shops and whatever have direct access down into the underground city. We have underground cities in every capital city government buildings have underground civilizations. And it surprises me that people find this hard to fathom because we've got them everywhere on this planet. Russia, all through Europe, America. The planet is completely covered in underground warfare, silos. In fact, when these lakes disappeared, people say a UFO craft sucked the water out. I think, I wonder if it's not being sucked down into the water silos of some of these cities underground. So the idea that people can survive underground is it's hard for me to believe that people would question it. If you think about it dynamically, it's much more easy to imagine that life could exist inside a ball than to be sticking to a gravitational field on the surface of this ball careening through space.
Yeah, by the way, you said getting away from Agartha. My understanding of Hollow Earth is the Earth as we think of with the core. Well, the core, it's not iron as we're told. It's more like a star of sorts. But there is like a mantle and a crust. But the thing is, you have to understand, with space and time being illusions, you can have all sorts of complex life forms living inside the space between atoms. And it is like in that what we think of as really small, it's not small, it's because size is an illusion in a sense. In those spaces between atoms, you can have all those advanced civilizations that we hear about when we talk about the hollow earth theory. Do you think there is some truth to that idea?
Yes, that's a very profound way of looking at it. The idea that in the dynamic of the subatomic world, a parallel reality, a parallel universe could be as minutely distant, an unfathomable measure, so minute that we can't even measure it, could exist an entire parallel universe. So that's one reality. The other is, well, I'm going to give you a quick story. In the Temple of Abydos in Egypt, which I describe also in one of my books called Where Pharaohs Dwell, there is the Temple of Abydos is a multidimensional portal. In fact, Dan Burish says that J-Rod, the alien that was held in Area 51, when he finally was able to be released, he asked to be taken back to Abydos, and he supposedly walked through a portal, and that's how he left this planet. Now, in the many times that I've been in Abydos and conducted ceremonies there, I have experienced very bizarre things going on in that temple. One of them is that I went into one of the chapels in the temple, and I saw on the wall an extraordinary carving fresco of the pharaoh Seti, whose temple it is, holding the icon of the goddess Mat, which is the goddess that weighs the soul on its way to the afterlife. And in her hands, she was holding a smaller Mat. And the smaller Mat was holding yet another Mat. And this went on for 6 different measures of smaller little icons of the goddess. And I was sitting there staring at it thinking, wow, that is extraordinary. It was like I was reading that this was 6 little statues. I wonder if the Egyptians were describing some sort of parallel dimensions or 6-dimensional consciousness. And I was transfixed by this for the longest time. And when I went back to my bed and breakfast place, I told the guy that ran it about what I'd seen. And he said, "Where did you see that?" And I said, "It was in the temple." "Where?" Well, I said, "It was in the second chapel." And he said, "All right, let's go." So we went to the second chapel where I had just spent 3 hours, and it wasn't there. And I said, "Wait a minute. I'm sure it was this chapel." He said, Where did you see it?" To make a long story short, he said that he too saw it once and never saw it again. And he was driving himself crazy trying to figure out how that was possible. And I realized, oh my God, we were in another dimension. This thing has appeared, this image has appeared to him, my dear brother, a man named Amir, who is a guardian of the temple. And then I had all the guards at the temple looking for this room, and they were all transfixed. Like, I saw it once. Where? The 5th chapel, the 6th chapel. And the bottom line was, this was absolutely, without a question, a demonstration of somehow being in another dimension for a short time of space and time, and then coming back in to this dimension. So, in answer to your question, there are these portals all over the place, and it's very possible that the hollow earth idea, Admiral Byrd, he slipped in. He was told to go back. It was to bring a message back of the perils that the human race was in. But he was an admiral in the Air Force, a logical left-brain thinker, right? And when he came back and brought the information of the inner earth court-martial, and he still stuck to his story. So what is that? Did he actually get in through some sort of doorway? I mean, he did describe this being flying over the North Pole and then suddenly seeing tropical plants and whatever. It sounds to me like he went into another dimension. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Just so you know, we have a little over 25 minutes left on the show. Got a few subjects to discuss here. Let's try to get them all in. One thing I do want to talk about in regards to Sitchin's work, two things actually. First of all, Sitchin talks about in his books about how one of Nibiru's moons collided with Tiamat. One half of Tiamat formed the asteroid belt, the other half formed the Earth, and he also said the moon was formed through this. I have an issue with the moon theory because there's so much evidence that shows the moon is artificial, so that part is where Sitchin's theory there might fall apart a bit, but other people have said, no, there's a different version of this. Two people in particular, David Icke talked about how he subscribes to what David Talbot said in the Saturn myth about how many years ago Saturn was much closer to the Earth. It didn't have rings, and at one point there was an explosion in Saturn which caused a crescent to appear around it. But when the Archon control system started to take over a lot more, they shifted away the way the solar system looked, and that caused the planets to go roundabout, and Saturn moved much farther away, and that caused all chaos and hell to break loose. That's his version of what happened. And also Michael Tsarian, he does not believe that Tiamat was the Earth and the asteroid belt in one. He believes Tiamat was a separate planet that underwent some sort of a collision, and all of Tiamat formed the asteroid belt. So we got three different people offering three different versions of a story in regards to how Earth was formed and the solar system looks the way it does. Who do you think might be right? Let's debate this for a bit.
Well, I adhere more to the idea that Tiamat was the entity that was blown up and has become the asteroid belt. I don't agree with the fact that that was how the Earth was formed.
Okay, that's your side of the story. Getting back to Akashic Record trader Andrew.
Again, I am not about calling anyone wrong. I'm just, whenever I express an opinion, it's my opinion. And I love the idea that there are lots of different opinions because it shows that we're thinking. We're trying to understand an enormous reality. And there may not be any one right answer. This is something that we really need to grasp, because if we don't, then we're still stuck in a very linear way of thinking, which is one of the reasons why we're in the mess we're in. We have very finite ideas about right and wrong, yes and no, good and bad, linear constructs, and perhaps when we're speaking about a multiverse and celestial machinations and behaviors, perhaps there are many parts of this puzzle, and perhaps that nobody really has to be wrong, that all of these ideas contribute to the picture.
Well, yeah, and that gets into the subject of there being many timelines, and I suppose in one timeline, This is what the planets did, and then over many, many years, you can somehow mix the timelines up to make them into one, but that's going way off into the deep end. Speaking of going way off into the deep end, I'd like to make a radical assertion. I said, getting back to Andrew Bartzis for a moment, on an interview he recently did with Sean Stone, who was on the Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura episodes recently, he actually said that the Anunnaki from Nibiru, they are locked out of our reality. They are no longer in our reality. And also in my interview with Ray Kusalandich, he talked about how the malevolent reptilian alien population, it's gone to only a few hundred now. There are many of them left. Their time is also up. So the idea that the Anunnaki have been locked out of our reality and the reptilian aliens have decreased so much in number recently, what do you have to say about that?
I don't think they're locked out of our reality. Otherwise, our reality wouldn't be manifesting with so much strife and so much bizarre alien technology and so bizarre control takeover on the planet. I think we're still facing these guys, and that they are aware that their power is one of the reasons why they're going for broke here is because they realize that their power is waning and that they're not going to be able to achieve what they want to achieve. That's why I talked about that earlier. What is their ultimate goal? No matter how hard they try, they cannot destroy this planet. and that the more they push the human race, the more we rebel. The more they try to harness us, the more we free ourselves. And so I think that what's happening is that they're recognizing that despite their omnipotence, they're failing. And that's why they're pulling out all the stops. But they're not going to achieve it.
All right, thanks. I'd like to talk about Sirius for a moment because you're in contact with Sirian beings. I was told by Peter Slattery, had him on my show recently, that the Sirius, the life in the Sirius star system, it sort of looks like ancient Egypt. And you know, the ancient Egyptians, they believe their gods came from the stars, and many people do subscribe, Osiris, Isis, and maybe some of the other Egyptian gods, they actually came from Sirius. If you were to go to Sirius, you would find beings that actually look like what they're depicted like in the Egyptian beings, and you would find a civilization that sort of looks like what ancient Egypt looks like, although a lot more complex and also in a lot more nature-like, I believe Peter Slattery described. It's a lot more like the natural environment, not like a sandy environment like you would see in ancient Egypt on a sandy plateau. But in regards to what Sirius looks like and the fact that maybe the gods from ancient Egypt did live in Sirius, what do you have to say about that stuff?
Well, it's funny, a lot of people when they talk about Sirius, they talk about it being a planet. And I remind people, hold on, Sirius, we're talking about a star. And orbiting this star, there were potentially planets. So let's get that clear. And then of these planets, there were watery planets. And this is why the Dogon tribes introduced us to the Nomo, who claimed... are you familiar with that information, the Dogon?
Oh, am I? I just took me a while on mute. Yeah, all about how they have a structure that shows how they knew that the Sirius star system had more than one star before mainstream science knew about it. Yeah, I know all about that.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So the Dogon described how these beings came out of a craft, threw out water, and created a lake, and then walked out of the lake, and they were fish-like, sort of like the Aono of Babylonian descriptions, fish-like humans, and that they walked up out of the water and then described to them that they where they'd come from. They described the three stars in Sirius and shed a lot of light on that reality that was discovered a century later, I think, by scientists. Okay, so yes, I believe and I hear and understand that Sirius has been a very important part of human development. Syrians were involved in Atlantis. Syrians were involved in Egypt very, very forcefully. More than forcefully, let me rephrase that. Very importantly, very powerfully, their gods, the Egyptian gods. Look at Sekhmet. She's a lioness, a human lioness. And I do understand that there was a civilization called the lion people, or the cats, the walking cats from Sirius, just as there were other beings from another planetary environment that were like the Nomo, or walking fish, or possibly the progenitors of dolphins. And that we, again, but I think there's a wonderful triangle of energy that comprises the Atlantean civilization, the Egyptian civilization, and its links to Sirius. And I'm just back from Egypt. I just took a sacred journey took people on a sacred journey there. And, in the middle of the desert, bringing my group in the arms of the Great Sphinx. The Great Sphinx looks out on the horizon and is there for the zodiacal rising of Sirius. She looks right at the star. And there's no question that she represents the lioness, and that stupid head of Cheops that was carved in later, it totally doesn't fit the body. It's a abortion of what was the original structure, and that was a great lioness that sits and peers out over the night sky on the desert sand, and that is a very Syrian effigy. I believe that is probably the most powerful Syrian effigy we have on this planet. And Sirius is still involved in Earth reality, and that hopefully they're going to help us without saving us, because I hate that idea that aliens are going to come and save us from ourselves so that we can go destroy a planet somewhere else, but rather that there is, on the side of the forces that want to assist Earth development, there are three-dimensional ETs of a higher intention, and there are higher dimensional realms working and helping us make this transition.
Thanks a lot. Just so you know, we have about 14 minutes left. I'd like to try to kill two birds with one stone here. It says here you studied mysticism and philosophy. A couple of things here. A lot of people say philosophy, it's not your friend, because philosophies were invented as a divide and conquer mechanism, and the fact that some philosophies teach benevolent things is a complete and total illusion, just like how religions teach benevolent things is an illusion, because in the end religions suppress your consciousness. Likewise, philosophies divide and conquer people. And also mysticism. What is mysticism? Well, it comes from the word mystery, and a lot of people have stereotypical ideas about what a mystery is, but a lot of those ideas might be misconceptions. So your take on philosophy and mysticism, briefly touch on those things, please.
Well, everything is open to misinformation and misconception. I mean, you can say it's a beautiful day outside, and somebody else is going to say, really? It's going to rain. So there's nothing that isn't subject to debate as to where it sits in the dual pole of consciousness. My idea is I like to investigate everything that makes me curious. I'm not a follower at all. So I don't believe in gurus. I don't believe in any one way to do anything. I don't believe that anybody, any of the people you've mentioned, or me, has the answer to anything. Rather, I love to investigate things that I'm curious about, and hopefully from every source that I do investigate, I glean something. Sometimes what I glean is that it's utter bullocks, and I put it down and walk away from it. And sometimes what I glean is, wow, this is an interesting concept. And so in my life, I've been drawn to everything that is, let's say, helping me as a human being find answers into the nature of reality, the nature of life, the purpose of life, the purpose of my life, and the idea of what this matrix really is. Are we inside a computer? Is this a multiverse with, like we've been talking about today, parallel universes, timelines? These are very heady ideas. Is it a bunch of bullocks too? Who knows? What I'm doing, and I'm hoping that others are too, is more than ever before in my life, using as much as possible discernment and going after, seeking out other opinions, other approaches of how we fit in the universe, what the point of life is, the nature of man's relationship to God or whatever we perceive the source of creation to be. And from all these pieces, I put together my own truth. Included in my puzzle is the honor of working with these beings that have poured through for so many years. The honor of taking myself to crop circles for 16 years straight and picking up information from there. The joy of exchanging with people like you who are very knowledgeable and have information to add to the puzzle. And my life is dedicated to using whatever sources I resonate with to help me develop a sense of the meaning of life. And wherever that comes from, like I said, I can go to something and say, this looks interesting, and then toss it and say, this doesn't work for me. But one thing I don't do, I've never been a follower. I don't believe in religion. I don't want to hear about a guru. Anyone who says there's only one way, my way, I will be running in the other direction.
Thanks. It also says you use your clairvoyant abilities to heal and support others, okay? How do you use your clairvoyant abilities to heal, and specifically here, but also support others in other ways?
Well, for 20 years, I worked directly on a one-on-one relationship with people who, I had a center in Rome for many years where people came to deal with emotional, physical, and deep issues. And I was able to communicate with the body. Sometimes there were attachments, and I was able to talk to them. And sometimes they would speak through the person. I mean, in other words, the person's lying on the bed in an altered state of consciousness, and out comes this voice that the person's not aware of. And using all the faculties that I have, which are clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairsentience, I was able to do some pretty interesting things with these people, always serving as an antenna for the person to get in touch with that higher self, or whatever you want to call that part of them that already knows what to do. And I did that work for many, many years. I worked with crystals. I worked with sound, Tibetan bowls, and had some remarkable things happen. And now I'm more using those abilities in teaching, in guiding people through sacred sites, holding the gates open, because I hate to give myself a name, but I would like to say that I walk between the worlds, and I have the ability to communicate with spirits, and then in the next breath I'm dealing with 3D. So I'm constantly balancing between those two worlds, and helping others people are served by that, because I can help them communicate often with relatives or animals or whatever that have passed over, or even help them understand more about their starseed heritage. And when I take people on sacred journeys, some pretty remarkable things happen, being able to open the portals, hold them open for people to get in, experience what they came to get, and then get out.
Thank you very much. What was I going to talk about here? In regards to sacred sites, or unsacred sites, if you want to put it that way, Vatican and sacred geometry, it has been said that the Vatican, some people say the Vatican is the number one problem in regards to spiritual consciousness suppression on planet Earth. Others say, no, it's second on the list. The sacred geometry scattered all around Earth's ley line energy grid. And, there's no such thing as a malevolent symbol, but even the swastika is not a malevolent symbol, but it has been twisted into a malevolent symbol. Likewise, the sacred geometry has been twisted into malevolent ways. So in regards to the Vatican, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Vatican because it's in Italy. It's its own city-state, but for all intents and purposes, it's in Italy. And sacred geometry being used to suppress consciousness, what do you have to say about those things? Just so you know, we have about 6.5 minutes left.
Okay. What I want to say is there's energy in form, and there's energy in number and in ratio, and that intent can determine how those energies are utilized. So if you are going to imbue a symbol, or let's call it sacred geometry, of course, if you're talking about dark use of it, the sacredness is questioned. But let's just say a symbol, for example, the pentagram, the five-pointed star can be a symbol of power. Inverted, it's used by the satanic worshipers. So my answer to your question is there is energy in those vibrations and those patterns, and I believe that the intent of the user, the intent of the designer, the placement of that energy can be subverted, absolutely, to be utilized for the intent of the person or people or beings that have placed it there. And in the case of the Vatican, there is a lot of geometry and symbolism that is being used to accentuate the energy that is being brought forward from that location, which we don't have time to go into, but you can clearly understand is probably not my favorite place.
It's very understandable. Enough time for one more subject. people are talking about how there's going to be a great consciousness shift in the upcoming near future, but a lot of people will hear me say this and say, oh no, we've been down this road before. A lot of people have said we're going to ascend into the fifth dimension or whatever, and they've given us specific time periods when that's going to happen, and they've all been wrong, and ultimately the reason that they were wrong is because we were never on that timeline. But some people are concerned, it's going to be like this again. Like a couple of examples, Matt Kahn, in a recent interview he did on Helene Lipson's radio show on N5D, he said that on September 27th, which is the day of a full moon, I think it's the 27th, he said that 1/3 of humanity will resonate with 5D consciousness. But when I interviewed Neil Kramer, Neil said, I don't see how many people can be awake by that many people can be awake by that time. And I'm sure you've heard about how 2017 is going to be a great change of consciousness. And Ray Kusalandich, who I had on my radio show, is saying that there's massive ET involvement to try to make sure that consciousness shift happened. And Alfred Weber did say that the fact that Fukushima is a global extinction event is one reason why the ETs are working extra hard to make sure that we have a consciousness shift in 2017 to put us into 4D, and for that matter, right into 5D, right after we are in 4D. And I don't want people to take a couch potato attitude and sit back and think we're going to be saved and we're going to go consciousness shift so I don't have to do anything. No, I want people to work hard to make this all the more possible. But a lot of people are going to have skeptical attitudes and doubts about this. So just so you know, you have 3.5 minutes. What do you have to say about the 2017 consciousness shift, which some people think will happen?
I think that it's very harmful to the overall picture for people to come out with these statements that this such and such is going to happen on such and such a date, because it sets up expectation, and then when it isn't realized, people get deflated and believe that they're powerless for change. We are shifting. We are having immense changes. The fact that we're having this conversation is indicative of the enormous shift that's happened in the last few years. When were these conversations being held on radio on planet Earth? And so rather than set up expectation for exactly on this date, the bell's going to ring, bingo, we're all going to shift into a higher state of consciousness. Let's be aware right now, every minute. Let's be aware of what's around us, what's really happening, what's happening to the living beings on the planet, what's happening in the solar system, what's that bizarre emission on Mars. We're getting more information. Let's look at the information, and then more important than anything else, let's regain our sovereignty, release ourselves from all of the technology that's being shoved down our throats so that we can be distracted, and know that we are in a perpetual state of altered consciousness, and that we don't need a specific bell to ring, a magic date that's going to reach some sort of mass critical number, but to honor the fact that right now, every minute, we are responsible for this change. We are the change we've been waiting for.
Yes, and let's make that change possible. Alex Collier Alex Collier actually once said in the mid 90s that he believed December 13th, 2013 would be the date that we descend into 5D. Well, he was given that date by his ET contacts based on probability of things happening, and well, that didn't happen because you weren't on that timeline. And even before that date, Alex Collier was in a sense retracting his claim when he said timelines are no longer relevant because everything is based on human consciousness at this point. So people, could you wake up? Sheeple, could you wake up and get us out of this prison planet matrix?
And so the one thing I want to leave people with is the idea that as long as we perceive time, the space-time continuum, as being past, present, and future, definable, linear, the further we are from understanding the node time, the totality that we are moving into. And in the higher dimensions, there isn't this ridiculous sense of time that something's going to happen. On all these so-called psychics or channels that say they got the word that on this date it's going to happen, and it never happens on that date. Because we are in a fluidity, and consciousness, my God, we know so much about how we alter reality with every thought. So 7 billion, 8 billion people believing something, sure, there's going to be a shift. But the reality is that we are in a fluidity. We're not in a linear reality. And this idea of timelines is valid only to a certain point because it's all fluid. It all can be bent. It all can be shifted, manipulated. You can if you can perceive of the space-time continuum as being linear, then you can also perceive of it of being made into a tube torus and then shifting time altogether. So I recommend that people stop focusing on these delineations that they're being told are going to happen, and contemplate it's all simultaneous time anyway, and we can affect it. And that's one of the most important things that we're going to be doing is higher consciousness beings, understanding the no time, understanding that we affect reality as one. And this is a conversation for another whole 2 hours, but that's what I'd like to leave people with.
Thanks. Great way to end the show. And since we have come to the end of the show, the live feed will go off in 1 second, but I can the stream's still gonna go on, the non-live feed stream. So I can tell you the same thing I am going to tell all of my guests. This is always the most emotional part of every show, but anyway, the fact is, Patricia, one of my goals with this radio show is to get as many different guests on my show as possible before I start giving any one specific guest double dips. And while you are indeed a fascinating individual, and while I have no doubt that I could easily do another 2 hour or maybe even multiple hour show with you, I have to say that I probably will not be asking you to come on my show again, but only because I need to give thousands of other fascinating individuals a chance to have some glory on my radio show. But mark my words, I will upload this video to YouTube. I will spread it far and wide. And by the way, the Facebook Nazis have unblocked me from Facebook, so I can start posting on groups again. And I'll make sure, after I've posted all my other previous shows over the past several weeks, I will post this show on many other groups and such to make sure many people get this information out. But Patricia, it was great having you on. I hope you got something from this, because I sure did. And I guess without further ado, I will say arrivederci. Did I pronounce that right? Is that how they pronounce it in Italian?
Right. Thanks for all the good work you're doing, and thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. Take care now. Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Folks, that's the end of this show. Next week, I will be having on Jim Self. It's only going to be an hour-long show, but I will try to get Jim Self on for an additional hour at some other point after the show next Wednesday that I'll have him. So Jim Self, next Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is Andrew Fisher signing off from Nature of Reality Radio. Enjoy the rest of your trek throughout infinite consciousness.